Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Let me check my volume. Always check your sound. I hope everyone is doing okay. I read this article the other day. I wanted to read it one more time just to make sure my understanding of it was right. Because sometimes you read stuff and you're like, that's too good to be true. That's too good to be true. These guys can't be Bond villains to this degree and be that bad at it. And yet they are. Let me explain what I mean. I often tend to believe that a person's intentions is demonstrated through what they're doing. So if a person is doing X, well, their intention has to be something else. People make mistakes, people fuck up, all those things are true. But when there's conscious, deliberate decision, then I tend to take them at their actions, words. Apparently, just coming out from the Hill, I think it was a day or so ago, a negotiation was taking place under the Trump administration that would give Julian Assange limited immunity to leave the embassy without being extradited to the United States. This gives two impressions. One, that there is an extraditing warrant or warrant to extradite hiding behind whatever the British population is doing or whatever the British government is doing. It gets that across. The United States is being cagey about it, but this negotiation would not have taken place. Implicit in this negotiation taking place is that the United States has some kind of arrest warrant waiting that's hiding behind the British government's order to keep him in that embassy, and if he steps out, arrest him. That's the first point. They will try to extradite him. But nevertheless, the negotiation that was taking place had to do with limited immunity to leave that embassy. Mind you, he's been there for 6 years. If he redacts certain information in some of the leaks that he had access to, meaning the United States government understood that Julian Assange had leaks, and in knowing that he had leaks, they were concerned about the leaks that he was going to put out. Julian Assange wanted to leave the embassy, and in which case negotiations started to take place for limited immunity to leave the embassy for whatever Julian Assange could give. Now, he's not going to give up his sources. He made that very clear. But he did say, I will redact certain information in this document. Best I can do. Otherwise, I'm breaking the spirit of what WikiLeaks is. The government was interested in this because the government knew certainly well, as much as they hated his guts, that he had the goods. Here's the catch, and this is the interesting component to this. The deal was actually going quite well until Julian Assange threw something else on the table. Because Julian Assange, I think, misunderstood the reality to which he was interacting with, or the people he was interacting with. He threw something on the table he thought that they would actually want. He said, in addition to assisting you into how to make, to get across how these leaks were made, those type of things, to get across a better way for you to go about your affairs, so this information won't necessarily be able to be leaked later, I will explain to you how I came about this. And not how I came about it, but more so who didn't give it to me. Let's say it that way. He said, I would explain to you the people who didn't give it to me. Meaning, it wasn't Russia! Russia had nothing to do with it. That was his point to him. I would demonstrate to you, from the standpoint of the evidence, I would get it across to you. I would prove it to you. I would nail it down to you to make it as a flat fact reality. I would get it across to you. Who wasn't involved in getting this leak? It wasn't Moscow. Do you know that Senator Warner, contacted Comey? Now, somebody contacted Warner saying, hey, do you want to have access to Julian Assange? Meaning, essentially, this deal is taking place. He contacts Comey. Comey says, Comey is given the order to stand down. Stop the negotiations. He's like, what do you mean stop the negotiations? Not Manchin, God damn it, I don't want to keep saying Joe Manchin. Warner here's what's taking place and says, stand down. Stand down. We don't need that information. We don't want that information. Julian Assange released one of the other dispatches that was brutal, which again got across that he meant business. The stand down order came after the second release. After the first release. And I noticed it somewhat a jumbled way. Let me change my timeline. Julian Assange releases a bit of the information. That release of information did not stop the negotiations at all. It was when he brought up the Russia thing. I would explain to you that Russia is not the person who's involved in this. I would prove to you, based on the evidence, that they were not involved in this. John Warner, gives the order to stand down. That order to stand down wasn't in and of itself the complete end of it, but it created a huge amount of distrust in the negotiations after that point. The Assange team at that point did not believe that the other team wanted that information, because it's a little weird that they would decide to stand down after hearing about Moscow wasn't the culprit. It's a scam. Either they know or they don't want to know, or they somehow may think, but from the Democratic standpoint, they don't want to know if Russia didn't do it, and I suspect they already know they didn't do it. You don't give your servers, meaning you give your servers to the FBI if you think you were attacked by a foreign source. It makes no sense. And in this situation, Julian Assange is like, look, I am the guy who would know. Of all the people on the planet, of the 7 billion human beings on the planet Earth today, I am the one guy that would absolutely know as a flat fact where I got this information from, the CIA Vault stuff, or the WikiLeaks stuff, or the hacks. I'm the guy who knows. And they said, we don't need that information. We don't want that information. And at the very least, they were willing to essentially end negotiations at that point. This sowed distrust in the Assange team that the intelligence services were being serious about the back and forth. They were serious, however, enough where they drew up, and I'm going to show the paper, but they drew up an immunity order. Meaning that's how serious they were. They drew up an immunity order, or a partial immunity order for him to leave the embassy. Julian Assange would be out the embassy right now today, in large part if it wasn't for Comey and Manchin shooting down the negotiations. It's amazing. Let's take a look at the article itself, and let's read through parts of it. I hope I gave it a decent understanding, but I always put the articles at the bottom, or at least I try to, so people can read. Apparently I didn't do it in this one. They can read a more contextual view afterwards. One of the most devastating intelligence leaks in American history, the unmasking of the CIA arsenal of cyber warfare weapons last year, has an untold prelude worthy of a spy novel. Let's skip that part, because I already took that part. Each played a role in the early days of the Trump administration to try to get Assange to agree to risk mitigation, essentially limiting some classified CIA information he might release in the future. The effort resulting in a drafting of a limited immunity deal that might have temporarily freed the WikiLeaks founder from the London embassy, where he's been exiled for years, according to interviews and a trove of internal DOJ documents turned over to the Senate investigators. Read the draft immunity deal here proffer that the Justice Department was considering for Assange. Here it is. But an unexpected intervention by Comey, relayed through Warner, soured the negotiations, multiple sources tell me. Assange eventually unleashed a series of leaks that the United States officials say damaged their cyber warfare capabilities for a long time to come. Oh, I'm sorry guys, I mixed that up. I said that backwards. An unexpected intervention by Comey, relayed through Warner. Essentially, Comey tells them to stand down, not Warner, but essentially them two are working together to tell them to stand down. My order is backwards. This yarn began in 2017 when Assange's legal team approached Waldman, known for his government connections, to see if the new Trump administration would negotiate with the WikiLeaks founder. Holed up in Ecuador's London embassy, they hoped Waldman, a former Clinton Justice Department official, might navigate the U.S. Law Enforcement Bureau and find the right people to engage. Now let's get down to this part, because that's just the people who are doing the negotiations. Let's see. Assange made it clear to his lawyer that he would never compromise his sources or stop publishing information, but he was willing to consider concessions like redactions. Although the intelligence community reviled Assange for his damage his past releases caused, officials understood any visibility into his thinking and opportunity to negotiate any redactions was in the national security interests and worth taking, says senior officials involved at the time. Justice officials picked David Loftman, an accomplished federal prosecutor and head of the Justice's Counterintelligence and Export Control section, to lead the negotiations. Now, let's see. Right here. Loftman described the government might want to achieve, and Waldman laid the groundwork for a deal to give Assange limited immunity and a one-time safe passage to leave the London embassy and talk with U.S. officials. Waldman played to Assange's belief that he was a publisher. The documents show. He put an offer on the table from the intelligence community to help Assange assess how some of the hostile foreign powers might be infiltrating or harming WikiLeaks staff. As the negotiations warmed, Assange unleashed his first leak on March 7, 2017, with about 8,000 pages of documents on the CIA cyber weapons. It did not deter the talks, however, since the United States officials were more concerned about what he might release next. Now, let's see. Subject to adequate and binding protections, including not limited to the acceptance, immunity, and safe passage agreement, Mr. Assange welcomes the opportunity to discuss with the United States government risk mitigation approaches related to the CIA documents in WikiLeaks' possession or control, such as redactions of agency personnel in hostile jurisdictions and foreign espionage risks to WikiLeaks staff. Understand what he's saying. The go-between for Assange is saying, hey, we're interested in this. We're still going to release our information because that is the modus operandi of WikiLeaks, is what we are. But we will allow certain redactions. So there will be certain sour points that we will keep out of the information that doesn't change the context of what we're releasing, but at the very least change stuff that may be damaging to certain personnel in certain areas of foreign actors. Sounds fair. Having a negotiation is what it is. I can't see that. It included in the written proffer with an additional offer from Assange. He was willing to discuss technical evidence, ruling out certain parties and the controversial leaks of the Democratic Party emails to WikiLeaks during the 2016 election. The United States government believes that those emails were hacked by Russia. Assange insists they did not come from Moscow. Mr. Assange offered to provide technical evidence and discussion regarding who did not engage in the DNC releases, Waldman told me. Finally, he offered his technical expertise to the United States government to help address what he perceived as clear flaws in security systems that led to the loss of the U.S. cyber weapons program. Essentially, look, I'm even willing to tell you your defects that allowed this information to be leaked in the first place. Inside Justice and Intelligence community, confidence grew that perhaps the mercurial Assange might adapt how he's released classified information. As we give continued consideration to the substance of your proposed proffer, please clarify a procedural point, Loftman wrote Waldman in early April. The government wanted to know if Assange demands for safe passage meant him coming to America or just leaving the London embassy for meetings there. This is a negotiation. Like, understand what I'm saying. This is not, hey, I'm just making an offer and I'm talking to myself. This is back and forth, coming to some resolution on how can I get across to you, or what can I offer you to A, let me out, but B, in letting me out, you get something out this deal of we will redact certain information, and that would even help you to prevent these leaks in the future. Let's see what happens, because what happens is amazing. Because look, there is no reason for them not to take this. Assange, WikiLeaks functions with or without Assange. The leaks take place with or without Assange, and if they're really concerned about those leaks being that damaging the agents that are involved, you make the deal. He's one guy. He's one guy. Whether you lock him in an embassy or whether you lock him into some kind of country because if he leaves, you extradite him, he's one guy. Supposedly, these leaks are immensely damaging, in which case you want to minimize the damage. He just wants to leave, and he's even putting on the plate of, look, I would also prove to you that it wasn't Russia. The one guy that knows is telling you he's going to prove to you that it wasn't Russia. Let's keep going. What the U.S. official did not fully comprehend was an early event weighed heavily on Assange's team's distrust of U.S. intentions. Just a few days after the negotiations opened in mid-February, Waldman reached out to Senator Warren. The lawyer wanted to see if Senate Intelligence Committee staff wanted any contact with Assange to ask about Russia or any issues. Warren engaged with Waldman over encrypted text messages, then reached out to Comey. A few days later, Warner contacted Waldman with an unexpected plea. He told me he just had a talk with Comey and that while the government was appreciative of my efforts, my instructions were to stand down to end negotiations with Assange, Waldman told me. Waldman offered contemporaneous documents to show he memorialized Warner's exact words. Waldman couldn't believe the United States Senator and FBI chief were sending a different signal, so he went back to Lothman, who assured him negotiations were still on. What Lothman said to me after he heard I was told to stand down by Warner and Comey was, "That's bullshit. You're not standing down and neither am I," Waldman recalled. A source familiar with Warner's interactions said that the senator's contact on Assange matters was limited and was shared with Senate Intelligence Chairman Richard Burr. But the sources acknowledged that Warner consulted Comey and passed along the stand-down instructions to Waldman. That did happen. Let's see. A lawyer for Comey did not immediately return calls seeking comment. While the negotiations survived Warner and Comey intervention, the episode sowed distrust in Assange's camp. The constructive, principled discussions with the Department of Justice that occurred over nearly 2 months were complicated by the confusing stand-down message, Waldman recalled. On April 7, 2017, Assange released documents with the specifics of some of the CIA's malware used for cyber attacks. It had immediate impact. A furious United States government backed out of the negotiations, and CIA Director Mike Pompeo slammed WikiLeaks as a hostile intelligence service. Soon, the rare opportunity to engage Assange in dialogue over redactions, a more responsible way to release information, and how the infamous DNC hacks occurred were lost forever. A few things I want to know with that. He had a conversation with Warner, who said he had a conversation with Comey. Do we know that Warner actually had that conversation with Comey? That's the first point. Did Comey give the stand down to Warner? That's the second point. Or did Warner just not want to know? I have questions here, and these questions aren't being answered. But the wild part about this is, do you remember when Pompeo came out and slammed WikiLeaks as a foreign actor? Who knew that there was a backstory to that? Like all these things that take place like in history, because understand we're living history, but all these things that take place in history, many of these things have backstory without context, that we don't get the context. He comes out, WikiLeaks is a hostile foreign actor, but just before you were trying to negotiate with a hostile foreign actor, and you allow Comey, a hanger-on from the Clinton administration or from the Obama administration, to kill this deal. Do you know they've attacked your president as getting in office in this kind of illegitimate fashion by foreign government? They've attacked lefties using this thing that Russia was somehow instrumental in environmental policy, instrumental in Democrats not liking superdelegates or lefties not liking superdelegates. They've used this Russian trope for all sorts of things, of their own failures and foibles and indiscretions. You had the opportunity to not allow James Comey, and I'm talking about Trump, and I'm talking about Pompeo, whoever else was involved in this negotiation. You allowed a hanger-on that let Clinton walk, mind you, meaning he'd already get across this idea of his political allegiances. Kill a deal with WikiLeaks that would have demonstrated that Russia wasn't the culprit. You've been screaming that these media organizations was fake news for the past 2 years. Everything that they would have put out at that point would have been considered fake news because the main story had been Russia somehow hacking the negotiations. You've missed out on a remarkable chance. And I'm talking about either Trump, Pompeo, or people who are around him on this. The guy who let Clinton off. The guy who let Clinton off was essentially the guy who killed WikiLeaks. Or killed this ability to nail down that Russia had nothing to do with it. Man, that's amazing. That's amazing. Look, I want to hear from Comey and I want to hear from Warner. Because Warner is making this argument that he was contacted by Comey. Okay. How do we know you were all I'm saying is what the people are doing matters to me more. They've been screaming that Russia has something to do with this election. And now you have the person who would know about to give you evidence showing that that wasn't true. And you killed the investigation. You killed the investigation. That's amazing. Comey confirmed by Bernie, Warner endorsed by Bernie. So what? I mean, I don't think anybody goes into this process confirming somebody thinking that, and that doesn't make sense. Just because, so you're saying that anyone that confirms somebody, you're all of a sudden captured by everything that person does? That person might do 99 things, they do one, and you're like, oh, Sanders confirmed that guy. I think Comey is a political hatchet man, just like I think all these guys are political actors. He could not confirm or confirm. I don't know what it matters. Lost forever is what I use to describe the corrupt DNC, dark roast lefty. The sick thing is that mad cow's numbers are the highest for millennial voters. You think they'd know better, but no. That's amazing, right? But to be fair, Bob, the millennial voters might be a small section. I mean, the average age of the people who are watching MSC are what, like 60 something? So it's like, yeah, they may get a share of the millennial voters, but it may not be a huge share. I suspect those people are more online. Just so I'm clear, cynical optimist, on break at my 420 shop, but I'll catch the reply. Nice! On break at my 420 shop. Lucky guy, man. You're a lucky guy. Lucky guy. Wow, Kinky Comey needs to be locked up for killing this much. Here, look, Comey let Clinton off. He let her off. I don't know how you come to some conclusion they didn't let her off. The IG report even goes into this thing of going after Comey for some of the stuff he did in that case. Bias all throughout the negotiation, all throughout the investigation. So much so where the person says, or the IG, even though he's talking about non-bias, he even goes so far as to say this puts a cloud on any level or any realistic view that this case was fair and honest. How can you have a case that's fair and honest when you have all these people who are biased actors that are part of the investigation? The same guy who let Clinton walk, who the IG report gave a tongue lashing to, who Democrats and Republicans at this point have roundly condemned, that's the guy that killed the deal allowing Julian Assange to walk. That's amazing. My argument here is that the reason that this deal was killed wasn't because of the releasing of information from the agents or anything like that. It had everything to do with him saying, I will get across to you that Russia wasn't the culprit. I strongly suspect. I can't prove it. I strongly suspect it. Everything else was going hunky-dory. When that bit of information came along, kill it. Kill it. Let's see. Here's the conversation between Warner. Let's see. Right here. Mark Warner. Mark, I wanted to let you know that everyone I've spoken to in the USG about this matter, each of whom I have also been entirely transparent with about my motives in trying to assist, has assured me that they understood and even appreciate my efforts. Perhaps that's wrong, but I wanted to pass along to you. I told Assange, just as I told the United States, I don't know what USG is, that I would end this pro bono role if I found that the objective, safe passage to discuss with you, I guess that's intelligence services, the past and future leaks, could not be achieved. Have had an important call about what your message will have an answer tomorrow. And that's when tomorrow he comes in and says, Comey told me to stand down. Julian Assange could be out if it wasn't for Comey. Now, you can make a case that this was some kind of combination or conversation between Comey and Warner. Either way, a Democrat and Comey got together in order to kill this deal. Julian Assange could be out today. Yeah. Would Jamal do a segment on the supervolcano forming under Vermont? I don't know. I saw that. I don't fully always do segments like that, only because it's more so of a political show. I guess it becomes politics if it erupts. That would be a fuckfest. But maybe. Maybe. This is fascinating to me. I'm sorry. This is fascinating to me. Like, it's... Yeah, this is fascinating to me. I'm going to end this here. I'm not going to keep this long because I think I have one more that I want to do after this. But Julian Assange could be out today. He could be out today. And the idea of Russia being the culprit would have had a knife put into it by the person who would know. Comey, protector of Hillary Clinton, says no and kills the deal. So I'm going to end this here. Alright guys, if you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support the Patreon. Thanks everyone. And we